Okay, welcome back to the Topsoil Podcast. This is episode 30. I'm with Mitch from Continuum Mag. Check him out on Twitter at Continuum Mag LLC, also on Facebook. I'm Trent Stout with Stout Seed. You can find us at Stout Seed on
Everywhere.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Check us out.
Episode 30, that's a big deal.
It is, it's like a milestone.
That's awesome.
The beer should be here soon.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we want to focus on just a planting report card. Basically, I know all day today, we were out in the fields looking at corn, looking at soybeans, and I know you've been out taking soil samples, you've been across the countryside. So, what does the corn look like? What are some issues that we're hearing about? I know the number one issue that I got phone calls all day today on was, why does my corn look so yellow?
Yeah.
Why does my corn look like it? Is this nitrogen deficiency? What's going on? So just to address that issue real quick, when your corn is between the stage of V2 and V3, even up to V4, and some of this can be a bit hybrid specific, but specifically, with corn, it lives off the seed. So it's pulling all of its nutrients from the seed until it sets nodal roots. Now, some varieties can be a little bit quicker at that than others, but when your corn is yellow, it's essentially, at this stage, we call it kind of the ugly duckling stage, it's essentially running out of nutrients because it's pretty much got that seed sucked dry. And so now it becomes a question of where's your nitrogen at, and not whether you have enough nitrogen, but more importantly, where's the nitrogen placed, and are the nodal roots getting to the nitrogen? So as that corn moves from V3, V4 into V5, V6, especially guys that are doing side dressing, they'll kind of see that readily available right away. But once those nodal roots get into that band of nitrogen, it'll churn from that yellowish neon type green to a real flat, dark green.
Matte green.
Yeah, like a matte green, yep. So you'll see that. A lot of times people call me this time of year and I just say, go fishing for a week and come back and look at it, and it'll all kind of pretty much all take care of itself. This is different than, here's another thing. You can also see sulfur striping too. So you'll start to see that from the leaves that are unrolling or even leaves that are present. If it's really hot and dry, you typically see what looks like sulfur deficiencies. But as we get rainfall, as we get moisture, those will take care of themselves. So right now, it's just a really awkward stage for a corn plant. It's just important to keep that in mind. But there is also this ugly head that can roar where you have a seed-to-end problem. Yeah. And most people, especially people using cover crops, have been scared to death about seed-to-end over the past year, right? Because that was our big problem last year. And so now everybody's really aware of it, and they're just hypersensitive to that issue.
Right.
I don't think that that's what's happening. If you listen to yesterday's podcast, most of what we talked about was just the stage of cover crops. The carbon that we have to deal with this year is so much less. If you put starter fertilizer on, if you have pre-plant fertilizer on, I would say with 99% certainty that that's not what you're experiencing at this point. No. Is a carbon tie-up. Most likely you're just getting ready to switch into a nodal root system, and in a week your corn will look completely different. Yeah. So that's kind of been the biggest thing that I've seen. The other thing that I would add before I turn it over to you is just plant stands. We've been looking at what guys want to know, what are bean stands looking like, what are corn stands looking like. Worked ground, we got some pretty big rainfalls. We had 4.5, 5 inches in one. Some of that washed right down some worked ground, even some no-till ground right down the furrow, washed some seed out. Guys had to replant from that. Guys that worked the ground on flats, they developed a crust, so depending on where your corn was at that point, you could have had some leafing out underground. But for the most part, corn stands look pretty good. Yeah. Corn got up in a reasonable amount of time. We had pretty favorable weather. So if you planted in that first window, late April, most guys, like we said, it got finished before May 1st got here. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going in the ground. most guys that got into that window, their corn looks pretty good. I would say we're probably 90 to 95% emergence, 85% emerged within that 12-hour window, which isn't exceptional. It's not a great, the highest number I've ever seen, but for the most part, it's not bad. I would expect corn yields to, at this point, if I was projecting, and I've told a lot of my customers this, I would expect to be under last year's corn performance when it comes to yield this fall, just based off of the emergence of the weather conditions that we had. But I don't think it's going to be, 50 bushels under. I don't think we're into like a disastrous type of a situation by any means. So, I would expect if you're used to 250 bushel corn, you probably will hit somewhere in that 235, 240 range. Might be down. It might be 245. Some fields might be as good as last year. But I just think last year everybody's fields were like consistently the best corn they ever raised.
Yeah.
I think it would be hard looking at the emergence, because not even if the corn's up, there's a lot of corn that's up. It's just, it's not as consistent, right? So you have some that, if it's at V4, you're going to have out of 32,000, you're going to have 4 or 5 that are at least a leaf behind. Depending on your skips, you could have some that are 2 leaves behind, which essentially are runt pigs, not going to produce a full ear. So it takes a lot of full ears to be hitting in the 270, 80 bushel corn range. So, I would just expect at this time, we'll probably be a little bit under last year from a yield perspective, but overall, 85% probably got emerged within a 12 to 24 hour window, which is good.
Which one? Yeah, and I've definitely seen right along the same lines. We're going to be checking on some more stuff here tomorrow and out in the field doing some more stand counts and whatnot too. I've got a fun little tool that we've been messing with this year, a Pogo from Precision Planting. It's pretty cool. So we're actually measuring out. So instead of measuring my 17-foot 5-inch row, I'm able to take my tape measure and just put a point for every plant, and I can mark my good ones, my 1 leaf behind, 2 leaf behind, no germination, kind of cool. And then it calculates all my population, all that kind of stuff for me, and calculates number of plants behind and what's the yield impact or the economic impact of all that. It's kind of cool. But anyway, so back on the some of the yellowing stuff and seed to end, I agree. I don't think we're gonna have huge issues right now. Cover crop breaking down seems to look pretty good. One thing that I've noticed is, like you're saying, most of that corn is kind of that off yellow, light green, kind of doesn't look bad, but you're like, oh, that's not the greatest looking ever, but that's normal. But then we've got a lot of hog manure in the area, and most of the hog manure gets put on at an angle, and you can see those strips big time. And wherever that corn is in that strip, that stuff is green and looks awesome. So just to feed right into your point, that it's feeding off the ear or feeding off the seed, but there's something to that manure as well, that it's readily available. It's
the knife marks, right? Like you can see the knife marks. So again, it goes back to placement. You know what I mean? Placement
of that fertilizer being right there. I think another interesting point along that is like what Chris Nichols talks about, that it's that initial plant growth is not as dependent on the immediate fertility that's available, but the interactions with biology that's there. And in that manure strip, you're going to have that improved biology. So that's an interesting point to kind of look at along with it. Maybe some C to N ratio kind of stuff, but not like a terrible C to N ratio throughout the whole row. And in the manure strip, you have a great C to N ratio. It's all sitting pretty good. Because in areas where you're planted with the anhydrous strip or everything is broadcast, you don't see the strips, the stripes in the field. But no, I agree. I think, and with the emergent stuff too, I think we're sitting pretty good. And soybeans seem to be coming up well and all that as well. So sitting all right.
I think it's kind of interesting. I'll play off of what you were talking about with your pogo stick, just to kind of give some guys some metrics, as you're going out in your own fields, I think this could be some valuable information, especially at this V3, V4 time. You're really evaluating plant stands, and then I get this question: how many pounds of nitrogen do I need to side dress?
Yeah.
You know, and so I'll tell you kind of my philosophy behind that. This is not unique. There are other guys that I don't remember where I originally heard this, but I'll give it to you, and it's worked pretty well for us. You know, the metric for corn is 8 bushels per 1,000. So if you give, let's just say we planted at 30,000, and I get all those plants to emerge, and they're all even, they're all at the same. I can get, depending on field, and it does help to track your fields over time. So this is just general baseline type stuff. But you know, if you have a good field, you have a good nitrogen program, you have potential at that point for 240 bushel corn. So 8 times 30, that's how you get 240. 8 bushels per 1,000 on a 30,000 plant. So if you're planting at 36,000, you know, and you have 36 plants there, you go out and you do your plant stand, they're all at the same stage. You take 36 times 8, and that gives you your yield potential at that point. Now, for side dress, you know, questions then, how many pounds do I need? You just look at how much you put on pre, you figure out, you know, whether you're working off a 0.8 metric, if you're working off a 0.6, all farms kind of respond differently, but it's important to keep those nitrogen records to know how many pounds of nitrogen you need to produce a bushel of corn, right? And that, and depending on biological activity and a lot of the soil sampling that Mitchell's doing, there's things that other metrics that you can look at to say how much nitrogen I need to produce that bushel. But these are good things to track. So if you're going out there, you say I have the potential based off of my plants to produce, you know, 250 bushel corn, and I only have 160 pounds of nitrogen on, then, you know, 0.8 to 250, maybe that's 220. I need to put on, you know, 50, 60, 70 pounds, or I'm, you know what I mean? Like that's, I'm never going to get there if I don't have the nitrogen to produce it. So look at your potential, understand that. Obviously, weather plays into this. There's a lot of things that can happen between V3 and harvest, but for the most part, guys who that I work with that we kind of pay attention to those metrics, they typically run pretty true.
Well, and I think we're fitting right in that. We're doing a little bit of stuff with some nitrogen rate and whatnot as well. So we're pulling soil samples right now, and then we're going to go out there and we're going to side dress different rates, all replicated, the whole deal, and be able to take all that back to like what you're saying. Okay, here's our metrics right now. Here's where we think we want to be. Here's where the soil test says that it thinks we need to be. Well, we're going to go out there and put on the different strips, different rates, and actually figure it out. And that trial is going to range anywhere from 100 units up to 250 units. And so that'll be an interesting trial to go off of. We did a couple of them last year too. And but able to, like I said, go out there and take a look at, okay, where's my nitrogen at? I think it's also important to look in the spring of what are my other limiting factors as well. Like we talked about sulfur and that kind of stuff. You know, you got to spoon feed those things as well. But good to look at that. I think one other thing we want to learn a lot about is how do I determine, am I at a 1-to-1 pounds of nitrogen to produce a bushel? Am I at 0.8 pounds of nitrogen to produce a bushel? 0.6, 0.4, whatever you're at. That's where I think it does take some experimenting on your own. And my theory is that overall, we're looking that for a corn plant to actually function, it does take a pound, or maybe even 1.6, I think is Ken Ferry's stuff, 1.6 pounds of nitrogen to produce a bushel.
No.
But we're getting most of that other stuff from not synthetic fertilizer.
So you're saying with
the
absolutely
synthetic fertilizer,
biologically dead soil, it takes 1.6
like
pounds.
For like these upper level yields and stuff.
Really?
That's what I've heard.
Wow.
But we're getting so much of our nutrients from the soil and from better soil health that's why we can knock down our input.
Yeah.
Let the soil do its deal and build that soil up and build those relationships up. Then we can back off on our end and save more money, but still be able to push yields. You still want to push it,
Yeah.
For the most part right now.
Well, I think that it comes with hybrid selection, right? So like,
huge.
that's the other thing about understanding.
When does your hybrid want nitrogen?
Yeah, and some hybrids are less responsive to that nitrogen metric because other, what we call nitrogen hogs, right?
Right.
Other hybrids need a lot of nitrogen to produce the same output. Yeah. So, understanding your hybrid selection and what those hybrids need from a nitrogen stance plays into all of that.
But that's interesting though, to just overall make sure that you're looking at how many plants you actually have out there.
And it's for you guys listening, if you keep good records, go back. Most of you guys are in corn bean rotations, or even if you're in a corn bean rotation, go back and look at the last time that your fields this year were in corn, and look at what your yields were versus how many pounds of nitrogen. Divide your pounds of nitrogen by your yield, and that'll give you a baseline metric. You know, typically if you're above 0.8, I tell guys that we got less efficient. If we are below 0.8,
that's good.
then that hybrid worked for you. Yeah. That's a profitable hybrid because it did better than that 0.8 metric. So, there's a lot of conclusions I would say that are anecdotal. I don't know how scientific all of this is, but there's a lot of things that you can draw conclusions from by just paying attention to your nitrogen to bushel metric and your emergence overall. So. It was a good stat. A guy told me one time that 85% of your corn yield is determined at emergence and how well you can get that crop to emerge within 12 hours. So, playing off of that, I've always found that to be pretty true. So if you need any more information or you want to talk more about that, look me up on Facebook. Yeah. Mitchell's got some stuff that he'd look him up on Facebook. Send us a message at the Topsoil Podcast, or Twitter at the Topsoil Podcast. We'd be happy to discuss about that further.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to have a kind of a conversation along those lines on what guys are looking at and how, as those decisions are being made right now.
Right. And we're always happy to help.
For sure. So good stuff. Yeah, really some good tools that guys can utilize and spark some interest and go and do your own research too and figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Hey, if you're interested in seeing this corn, if you're looking at pictures for corn, I got to give a shout out right now at Corn Paparazzi on Twitter. Look it up. There's going to be tons of pictures. Lots of pictures. Millions of pictures. Well, not yet, but pretty soon. So our intern from Iowa State, Emily Hora, she is going to be handling that account at Corn Paparazzi. And I think it'll be fun. If you like to look at corn,
could be huge.
If you like to look at soybeans, we'll be taking pictures. Those pictures will all go on there. Unedited raw, just so you can see them how we see them.
Just made the account already beaten.
Just made the account.
Yeah, and Ryan, she's already surpassed Ryan.
Yep. Already. Hey, we'll tune in next episode. Thanks.